Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff Crouere, host of Ringside Politics on WLAE-TV, WGSO Radio in New Orleans. Very pleased to be the MC of this U.S. Senate debate. We're very pleased to have four candidates with us: Mr. Beryl Billiot, Mr. Donald Crawdaddy Crawford, Mr. Troy Hebert, and also Mr. Charles Marsala. And we're also going to be joined this evening by two members of the local media who will be joining in the debate by asking some very pertinent questions. Very pleased to welcome Mr. Jimmy Delery. He is a columnist with the St.Bernard Voice, and also is Rachel Wulff, and she is a news reporter and anchor for WWL-TV Channel 4. So to get started, we're going to ask each of the candidates to give us some introductory comments. For those introductory comments, they'll have 2 minutes, and then we'll have 2 minutes for a close, and then in between, we'll try to pack in as many interesting questions as we can, and for each of those questions, the candidates will have 1 minute each. We'll break them down into certain areas of discussion, and we hope to cover as much ground as possible. So let's get started with our opening comments, and Mr. Beryl Billiot, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jeff. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Beryl Billiot. I'm a lifetime Louisiana resident, a Native American, a Marine Corps veteran, a small business owner, a proud husband, and a father. I'm here before you because I'm asking to serve as your next senator. We need to take our government from a position of power and put it back the way it was meant to be, as a position of service. And as your senator, I'll vow to fight for heightened national security, to secure our borders and keep America strong, to stop the infiltration of people that are trying to weaken our establishment. We need to ensure that we have a fundamentally sound education system, that our priorities are put in order that we can continue to be free. Everything is based on finances in America. We're a capitalistic free enterprise society, and we must ensure that we have the funding available for all the programs that we wish to foster. And if we do not prioritize those and we leave those that are most important left behind, we need to take our budget and our huge deficit and turn it around. We have to ensure that our children have a bright future. For without eliminating this crippling debt that we keep building upon within our nation, we're going to find ourselves at the end of the road with nowhere else to go. My children and my grandchildren deserve much better than what we're leaving for them now. It's time to put new leadership in the U.S. Senate. It's time to put someone with a little common sense, a little aptitude, and a whole lot of drive and motivation for our future. I'm asking each and every one of you to consider voting Beryl Billiot, number 1 on the ballot, for U.S. Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Billiot. Mr. Crawford, your opening statement.
Hi, I'm Donald Crawdaddy Crawford. Thank you for coming out tonight. I grew up in New Orleans. I was adopted at 27 days old into a middle-class family. We were poor. I lived in one half of a double, and my parents rented out the other side for extra income. Went to public school in New Orleans for a long time. Eventually went to UNO and got a degree in finance, working the whole time while I was at UNO. Subsequently, I worked at Entergy, and at night I went to Tulane and got an MBA. Right now, I'm a business appraiser. I work on healthcare deals all over the country, and I see a lot of interesting things happening in healthcare. Lots of mergers and acquisitions, and I have to think about what's happening to the country down the road. 20, 30 years from now, after all these companies merge, what's life going to look like for us? And I also see the same things happening in the rest of the economy too. One company after another merging and putting lots of people out of work. People out of work can't pay taxes, and the government's not going to get funded with no tax dollars. So, as a business appraiser, I look at what the government's doing, and from a financial perspective, everything that they're doing seems wrong. They waste lots of money on frivolous programs and then complain about not having money for the things people are crying about. Welfare, people in the street. We need to get people off the streets. There's no reason why we have so many ex-military that are not housed. They're living on the streets. 25% of them have some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder. They need to be taken care of because they're the ones that gave us the opportunity to have a free country and live here. So that's what my platform is reforming government from the inside out and making it a better place for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Mr. Hebert, your opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Troy Hebert. I'm running for the U.S. Senate. I'm from a little town called Jeanerette, Louisiana. It's a little south of Lafayette. I want to tell you that, first of all, I'm very honored to be up here with these distinguished gentlemen here tonight. I think Louisiana is in a very unique position that we can send someone to the U.S. Senate that's literally going to go and work for people like you and I. I think one of the problems we have in Washington, D.C. is that everything is just too partisan. That's why I'm proud to be a conservative independent. I served in the state Senate. I think I was the first and only independent state senator to serve in the Louisiana legislature. And I want to tell you why I'm an independent. With all due respect to my Republican friends right here, but you know, the Democrats don't deserve to win and Republicans don't know how to win. What we have to do is that we have to put partisanship aside. I have to tell you, I am for Donald Trump, and I'm for Donald Trump for several reasons, but the first reason, as a business person myself, we've tried out the politicians. Let's send a business person to Washington, D.C., and let's drain that swamp that he's talking about. And because we're in Louisiana, we know a little bit about swamps. And I can tell you this much, is that I think there's going to be a surprise on Election Day. I think the polls are wrong. I think Mr. Trump is gonna be successful, because God bless us if he's not. We can't afford Hillary Clinton as President of the United States. We've already had 8 years of Obama and 8 years of a husband. And so I think that if Donald Trump becomes the president, I look forward to going and be a senator that works very closely with him to make America great again.
Thank you, Mr. Hebert. Mr. Marsala?
Hi, thank you, Jeff, and I want to thank you for being here and being back at Tulane. I graduated from Tulane in 1982 in mechanical engineering, and I went out to drill for oil in Los Angeles, California. An oil bust hit, and then I switched to designing Air Force bases and manufacturing areas. I was heavily involved with manufacturing. And let me tell you, there's a lot of manufacturing jobs that are moving overseas right now, and I believe what I learned in California is a way to bring those back to Louisiana. Because in Louisiana, we have a great education system, a lot of colleges, and we're starting to see the taxation programs work to bring back like IBM to Baton Rouge, CenturyLink to Monroe, and other companies to the North Shore. And that is an area where I believe I have the expertise to do as being a former mayor in Silicon Valley and my Louisiana connections to bring that back. I'm also a Republican. I do believe what we've seen is people want a fresh face. They want term limits. The people that are there right now, we've seen take hundreds of thousands of dollars from drug companies and then pass bills so that we can take more drugs. We've seen them take hundreds of thousands of dollars from fertilizer companies, and then we see more chemicals in our waters and the cancer rate higher. And we're seeing Bayer and Monsanto merge. And that's going to put on both ends. We're now going to see somebody can give us the toxins in the water and somebody can give us the drugs to cure the diseases we get. As a financial advisor, I've written a book on leaving your legacy. And I believe people want low taxes so they can leave that legacy. I've been endorsed by a group called Conserve America, which has Teddy Roosevelt IV as one of the advisors. And that is balancing industry and environment. And we've got to get back to that. We also have had flooding here. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I've dealt with flooding issues in California in my town. And I've toured the areas here to meet and realize what we need to do for drainage systems so we can prevent the flooding. Because if we don't take care of that and the coastal erosion, we're going to have some serious problems. And I look forward to a great afternoon tonight.
All right, thank you, Mr. Marsala. Okay, so we're going to break down the debate into a number of different areas. And then the first area we're going to explore is finance and education issues. And we'll start the questioning with Ms. Rachel Wulff. Rachel?
Thank you, Jeff. I've enjoyed getting to know more about all of you gentlemen and researching more about you this afternoon, and also listening to some of the things that you've accomplished, and all of you have a business sense. So the first question that we're going to start off with is about business and about jobs specifically. According to the Louisiana Workforce Commission, employment in Lafayette dropped by 7,200 jobs in the last year. Home at Thibodeau employment down 3,400 jobs. 2,300 construction jobs lost in New Orleans. We've seen some of the gains with construction in Baton Rouge. But again, thousands of jobs with Hollywood South having that tax credit capped. This area in the last 12 to 15 months has struggled, and we know that the oil and gas revenue is down in the river parishes. What are you going to do, if elected, to bring jobs back to Louisiana and employ people? Because right now our unemployment rate is up higher than it was, up to 6.7% compared with 6% last year. And
let's start with you, Mr. Crawford.
Sure. I think one of the main problems in the country is we don't have tariffs. The second thing George Washington signed into law was a tariff. And all throughout the presidential history, tariffs have been signed really to support us American citizens and support American jobs. So that would be one thing we should investigate heavily. There's a lot of people on both sides of that issue. Some say it will disrupt trade, but at the end of the day, we have to support each other as Americans. Whenever there's a crisis somewhere, we just had all the flooding in East Baton Rouge Parish. What happened? Citizens got their boats out of their backyards, went down and pulled people out of the water. So that's people supporting people. We need to have that same kind of attitude here in the country about buying things made in America, employing Americans, and all that extra tax money that's going to occur because we're employing each other is going to feed back into the federal government. So tariffs is one way to start.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Mr. Hebert?
The first thing we need to stop doing is, in Louisiana, sending doctors and lawyers to Washington, D.C. You know, some of those million-dollar candidates we have running in this race, 2 of them are doctors and 2 of them are lawyers. And I'm sure they make fine doctors and fine lawyers. I just don't think they're going to make a fine senator. When it comes to economic development, let me say this, from the Lafayette area myself, we are experiencing some hurtful times in all industry. I believe when it comes to economic development, there's 3 job killers that we have. The first one is taxation, the next one's regulation, and the other one's litigation. The politicians tax us to death, the bureaucrats regulate us to death, and the lawyers sue us to death. So we need to get rid of those 3 things, and we need to allow businesses some type of opportunity and some freedom to go ahead and create jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Hebert. Mr. Marsala?
All right. I have an issue with tariffs, and that is I believe the Civil War actually got started over tariffs. We put tariffs on goods coming in to the South so that we could help Pennsylvania sell their products at a better price. And we have to be very careful with tariffs because they're going to hurt one sector or one area of the country at the expense of another one. What we also need to do is, like I was saying earlier, what happened in Baton Rouge is they put 900 jobs in along the river by forming a private partnership with LSU. And that means that LSU is now teaching those guys what they need to do, those students, so they're prepared to go to work for IBM and have a great listing of IBM on their resume. We have to take care of, like, losing the film industry tax cuts is major, and these tax incentives work. So if you want to bring those jobs back from being over in India to Louisiana, and we've got the students, we've got the people here, and the agriculture to support it, the landscape, that's the place to do it, lower the taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Marsala. Mr. Billiot?
You know, the thing we need to do, Jeff, is we need to make sure that we approach this from a systemic point of view. All too often, government focuses on one particular issue. We're not thinking about the ramifications of that issue on the other side. We need leadership that's going to bring both sides of the issue together and formulate a plan. We need to foster business-friendly legislation that not only allows the businesses to come and attract them into the Louisiana or even into the United States of America, because we got more businesses leaving because they have more incentive to produce outside of America than within America. So we, the people, must buy American products. We are a capitalistic free enterprise society. The consumer dictates the world. And so we need leadership to formulate a plan that works on both sides of the aisle, that works on both sides of the issue. Because if we only focus it from and approach it from one angle, we're going to lose on the other side. So we have to remember that what we do in America is a very complex system, and we need to do it systemically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Billiot. We're going to stay in the same area, and the next question will come from Mr. Jimmy Delery.
Okay, first off, gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for taking your time out of your lives, in your personal time, to be part of the American system. And I must thank you all. And I have to tell you, we've got a bigger audience than the Dillard debate tonight, and the public is able to attend. So I have a question, and it's about pensions and Social Security liabilities. I find it odd that people can work, earn a pension. The pension is based on maybe the last 3 years, particularly if they're employed by public government. And I just don't understand, because somebody that starts working at $10,000 a year, 30 years later they're making $75,000. How can we base it when they were only inputting at $10,000 the first year? And I feel like now the state of California, from what I understand, is going to get hit so hard with pension obligations. And the same thing, Social Security. I feel sorry for some people if their husbands die at a certain age and all of a sudden they're locked into, $800 a month. How do you live on that? So how do we balance this problem of pensions from public sectors, and then the private people, look at Social Security being very limited?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Delery. We'll start the questioning, the answers with Mr. Hebert on this one.
Well, first of all, I think the political reality is that whatever commitments were made to people that are working today should be honored. We shouldn't change the rules in the middle of the game. But I know what Georgia did. Georgia actually passed legislation that said, listen, today we're going to honor what's today. But tomorrow, starting tomorrow, when you're hired and you come to work for the federal government or the state, this is the new set of rules, and probably more of a private sector mechanism and pension plan that the private sector actually has proven to be realistic. And so I think if we go that route, it might be politically palatable and feasible to actually pass something rather than just continue talking about it and never actually making it happen.
Mr. Marsala?
One of the biggest problems we have is that the treasurers of the states that are forecasting this are saying that they can earn 7.75% on the money. So they're not admitting that there's a problem. And the public doesn't know there is a problem that's so big. I mean, right now, Louisiana is only funded at 58%. It's down from 64 just 2 years ago. And Treasurer Kennedy is telling people we're in great shape. He doesn't have a plan, and he thinks he's going to do it by earning almost 8% a year on the money. You're going to have to do that, but politically, Arnold almost got voted out, and many people have been voted out of office when they start saying we're going to take back those pensions. So it's a very difficult thing to put in place to say we're now going to change, but you're going to have to, because if not, it's going to be about 75 cents on the dollar in about 20 years. And obviously in Social Security, what you said, we've got to address that to take care of people who are in that situation, and there's some other issues with Social Security, like clawbacks, that we need to deal with, where people don't lose their house when they go into a short-term stay in a nursing home as well.
Thank you, Mr. Marsala. Mr. Billiot?
Well, the GASB is what regulates most governmental agencies as far as their pensioning and all that stuff. There have been some new rules coming forward that's going to require government agencies to allocate certain monies for these pensions. Louisiana has a $16.6 billion unfunded pension liability. But what we've done in this time is we've actually increased, we've created legislation and put an amendment to the state constitution that money is going to be put aside each year for the pensions. And then it's not a fix-all, but it's a way to accommodate making sure that we're looking at our future liabilities, and that what needs to happen is that these unfunded pensions, instead of being a footnote at the bottom of the financial statement, it's put up next to your debts, and it's going to be addressed strongly with those. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that we hold accountable, but it all comes back to jobs. We need to create jobs, bring manufacturing back in. We got to have more people working, putting into the plan that's taking out of the plan. And if you create jobs and foster that revenue, those problems will be minimal.
All right, thank you, Mr. Billiot. Mr. Crawford?
Pensions are antiquated, and really we need to get rid of them at every level. Most companies don't have them anymore, whereas 50, 60 years ago they had them, and there have been major problems with them. Studebaker, for instance, when they went out of business, 4,500 people lost 85% of their pensions. And I know there's some guarantee provisions today that weren't in place a long time ago, but the idea that you're going to basically say that, hey, we're going to take care of you in your retirement, and you're going to put that burden on somebody else who's coming up behind you, nobody knows the future. And really, so the best thing to do is have a partnership. The company puts in some money, and so do you, and you fund your own retirement, roll your own pension, as it were. And basically, if you do that yourself, then you can keep that money and give it to your children. And you can't do that with a pension. So that would be the way to go.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Okay, folks, we've covered our first area, our first few questions. We're going to take a brief time out. When we come back, we'll be talking about some important issues involving health care right here on the U.S. Senate debate. We'll be back.